order. If I could just remind everybody to put their cell phones to airplane mode, please. Kimberly, will you call roll?
President Bill Desmet, Vice President Carrie Nicholson,
Here.
Secretary Lisa Middleton,
Here.
Treasurer Larry Williams,
Here.
Trustee Brent Dawson,
Here.
Trustee Shauna Gamble,
Here.
Trustee Richard Lindsay.
Here.
And now we'll have our customary moment of silence. Shauna, would you like to lead us? Sure. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could I have a motion to approve of the agenda? So moved. Roll call, starting with Richard?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Members of the audience may address the board on agenda items only. Anybody that would like to address the board? We'll move on to consent agenda. Do I need to
take a motion? Yeah.
Can I have a motion on the consent agenda? Support. Randy, can you give us the background?
Sure. In the consent agenda, you have the minutes from last board materials. Financials are included in your board materials. Employment offers have been accepted pending board approval, successful validation of criminal history record checks, completion of unprofessional conduct checks, and validation of credentials. It's a recommendation of the superintendent that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Is there any discussion? And then we already made the motion, right, Randy? So just,
Go to vote.
Shauna?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
So move on to the report of the superintendent.
Okay, the first one up is special recognition of new hires. We have a pretty interesting list, considering so late in the school year so far. Courtney Barnes fills the position of child care aide at the Shamrock Center. Ms. Barnes is a graduate of Marshall High School. Simone Buller fills the position of assistant cook at Marshall High School. Ms. Buller is a graduate of Harper Creek High School. Jody DeLapis fills the position of intensive resource room paraprofessional at Harrington Elementary. Ms. DeLapis earned her associate's degree from Kellogg Community College with a major in nursing. Cassandra Gibson fills the position of noon hour supervisor at Walters Elementary. Ms. Gibson is a graduate of Coldwater High School. Lisa Grinston Chapman fills the position of paraprofessional at Marshall Middle School. Ms. Grinston Chapman earned her associate's degree from Kellogg Community College with a major in human services. Mackenzie Kincaid fills the position of child care aide at the Shamrock Center. Ms. Kincaid is a graduate of Marshall High School. Nicole Kundrat fills the position of one-on-one paraprofessional at Marshall Middle School. Nicole is a graduate of Ionia High School. Melissa McGraw fills the position of child care aide at the Shamrock Center. Ms. McGraw attended Delta College, where she earned an associate's degree with a major in art and design. John Jack Robinson fills the position of paraprofessional at Marshall Middle School. John graduated from University of Minnesota with a major in business. Stephanie Schweikert fills the position of library technician at Harrington Elementary. Ms. Schweikert attended Thomas A. Edison State College, where she earned a bachelor's degree with a major in English. And finally, Chad Smith fills the position of bus driver in the transportation department. Mr. Smith obtained his GED through the Battle Creek Adult Education Program. That concludes special recognitions. Next is the Mesa Fall Conference. Thank you for supporting my attendance in the fall and winter conference for MASA. Just a couple highlights on the conference. The founding member of the International Center for Leadership and Education, Dr. Bill Daggett, was there for us, kind of an intimate roundtable discussion for some invited folks, and I was able to take advantage of that. It was really amazing conversation because I was the only superintendent for the first 20 minutes in the meeting room. So I had a lot of undivided attention about our pathways and the different things we're doing. Other superintendents joined, and we ended up having really good spirited conversation about how to make true change in public education based on years and years and years of research that Bill's done. So really pleased with that. Looking forward to maybe a next opportunity to sit down with him in another workshop or meeting where we can talk a little bit more about specifics. Hot topic that we had during the session was about Dr. Stephanie Grant, Director of REACH Parent-Child Program and Trauma-Informed Communities, and she did a great job talking about trauma that we create for our children from the school perspective, as well as trauma that our children experience in other avenues at home or in the community. And we kind of rethought through that process about how do you, early on, how do you address behavior issues with children rather than reaching out and trying to connect with them on a relationship level, an emotional level, and understand what's behind the behaviors. We tend to control it, and the controlling behavior tends to be adding to the stress of the moment and their ability to stabilize and get centered on learning and being in the school. So she went through a whole lot. That's just a really brief overview, but she did a really great job. I was very impressed with her presentation, and we talked a little further in breakout groups about mental health services and counseling services for our young people in the schools, and also taking care of our own staff, the teacher staff, administrators, and making sure that the stress and the trauma is being at least acknowledged and addressed whenever we have the opportunity to do so. So it was a pretty good rounded piece. I presented a workshop called Walking a Tightrope Across a Deep Canyon. The walk between student rights to free speech in public schools and the laws that govern our bullying, anti-bullying, and harassment laws. Lisa Swam was my partner from Truan Law Firm, and she always does a great job with that presentation of bringing all the legals in and the previous judgments made by courts and Supreme Courts and lower courts. And we had a really good group of people there, so it was a very good spirited conversation. Lastly, I went to a journey to culturally proficient leadership that was given by a particular district with a racial diversity population of about 7%, which is where we were at one time before, and we're now at 34% racially diverse population in our public schools in Marshall. I thought it was interesting because it wasn't necessarily what transpired in the schools that drove them down this path, but what was going on in their communities and a couple of incidences that occurred. And so they were trying to be proactive in their district on how to address issues of cultural diversity, issues of implicit bias, and so forth. So I thought that was very interesting to hear how they were developing that, how they had a ethnicity coach that was there to work with their district and walk them through some of these paces. And then finally, I wrapped up just to understand what the changes were in advanced placement. They changed the system as of August 1st. I checked with Annie McCormick, who is our advanced placement coordinator at the high school, and he's on top of all of that, so I was really pleased to see that. Actually, College Board actually has a new system that allows you to do a dashboard of how all of our kids are doing in AP in real time. And also who's scheduled to take an exam and who's not, and all those types of things. So it's good that I've got that access and I can look at those things as well, and so can the building principal. But all in all, thank you very much for the opportunity to do that.
So Randy, do you see there's any particular changes that you think that you would make based on what you've learned?
Well, there's a whole lot of interesting and sound ideas that Bill Daggett was offering, and I'd like to read up on a little bit more about that. For example, some of the high-performing schools and transfer schools are no longer using department chairs as discipline leaders in the high school level. They're actually using multidisciplinary teams to have discussions about how the different domains interact with each other, and not just from the perspective of trying to protect the English department or protect the math department and so forth. They were really encouraging a lot more grade level work, multidisciplinary team work, reinforcing the PLCs, the professional learning communities, and so forth, but you have to do some structural changes involved in that as well. So there's some things that we could possibly consider with leadership team. Any other questions on that? Next on the agenda is the Eastern Equine Encephalitis, EEE virus. Well, so I knew some things were going on before I left last week. When I got back on Friday, I was back only for about an hour and a half off the road, and I received an announcement from the Calhoun County Public Health Department. We knew about the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and the statement they started making across the board for a number of districts, and we weren't one of them, or a number of counties, and we weren't one of them at the time. Jackson County was not on that list, and now they are on that list. Calhoun County is on that list. Not sure about Branch yet. Can't imagine Branch is not going to be listed as being at risk, but right now they don't have any confirmed viruses. Jackson, I understand, got on the list because they found EEE virus in deer in Jackson County. That's one of the ways you get on the county list. We actually, unfortunately, had a case that finally was demonstrated and proven by testing that it was EEE virus. We also have another suspected case right now in Calhoun County, but it takes about 2 weeks to get the results of that test back. So the first test, or the first case that we were talking about that led us down into now being one of the at-risk counties, probably occurred a number of weeks back before it even got to our attention through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So we just have to be mindful of that, but you can see from all the paperwork that I've given you, we have in your packet, you've got, first off is the most recent letter done this afternoon after the leadership team about what our approach and policies and interventions are going to be as far as rescheduling events, et cetera, et cetera. Since this has just gone out, if you allow me the latitude to read this letter, would that be appropriate? Okay. To all stakeholders of the Marshall Public Schools District, due to the risk posed by the Eastern Equine Encephalitis EE virus transmitted through infected mosquitoes in Calhoun and surrounding counties, Marshall Public Schools are adopting the following guidelines that will impact student activities, parentheses, sporting events and practices, outdoor marching band practices, community programs and events for children that were previously scheduled after dusk or before dawn on our school grounds and facilities. First bullet point, all outdoor events and activities will be scheduled to begin and end to the extent possible after dawn and before dusk. And when you read that, look at like 637. All indoor activities, events and activities will be scheduled to begin and end to the extent possible after dawn and before dusk. Students walking to and from our bus stops or walking to and from our schools are reminded to take personal precautions while outside before dawn and after dusk to reduce the risk of being bitten by mosquitoes. Guidelines offered through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and the Calhoun County Public Health Department include using EPA-registered insect repellents that contain the active ingredient DEET or other EPA-approved products to expose skin or clothing, always following the manufacturer's direction of use. And 2, wearing light-colored long-sleeve shirts and long pants, socks, and shoes whenever outside before 7 in the morning and after 7 p.m. at night. Please know we are taking these steps out of an abundance of caution to the potential risk posed by EEE. These precautions will be in place until our weather turns cold again and we've experienced our first hard frost of the year. Some events and activities may be canceled due to challenges in rescheduling or due to the circumstances of the event activity in question. For example, I have directed our leadership team not to hold activities in areas that have high grasses or dense foliage, forest, low standing water such as swamps or ponds, or areas where animals are in high concentration. This applies thus to field trips during the school day as well, to nature centers, zoos, orchards, etc., until further notice. The Marshall Public Schools routinely sprays insecticides around all facilities at the beginning of the school year and have recently done so again at all playgrounds and athletic practice and contest fields. Please contact your building principal or program director for more specific information about schedules or activities. For more information regarding EEE, I gave the website of the Department of Health and Human Services and the Calhoun Department of Health. We also have posted information on the district website and Facebook page, as well as information made available at each school office location. In the packet that you have is all of that. Inclusive is a letter from Truan Law Firm that was a letter of general advice that went out to all districts across the state who are retainer clients. And basically they give us some guidelines in regards to many of the things you just heard. Any questions?
So the health department is gonna tell us when they think the frost is hard enough? Is that when we release these, once the?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I mean, hard frost for one person, it's not gonna be hard frost for the other. So I'm not really sure what that means. Right now, I've taken the steps to make sure that we look at rescheduling if we need to, if possible. If not, and some events will be canceled. But we're doing that from now until November 3rd, believing that sometime between now and then we should have a hard frost. Once it gets cool, and the temperature goes down, where we have very cold evening temperatures and cooler daytime temperatures, we should be in pretty good shape with that. The chances of getting bit by one of these mosquitoes that's carrying a virus is very, very, very small. However, we have to be diligent based on the guidance that we've received from the state and the county. You also see in your handbook or your board packet the letter that the ISD sent out over the weekend. I worked with a couple district superintendents on Saturday, and we fashioned a letter through Jerry at the ISD on Sunday to be able to issue that statement that all 12 districts within Calhoun County are working together to reschedule and work with each other cooperatively to make sure that we can at least have some events for our kids in appropriate times based on this new risk.
Randy, when is the big zoo lessons for the elementary schedule? Is that in October?
Yeah, actually in 2 weeks is when Harrington's scheduled to go, and they're going to have to reschedule. Right after that, in the last part of October, is Gordon, and they're going to have to reschedule. I think, Matt, are you at, Matt?
No, we're in the winter.
You're in the winter. So we'll see what we can do to reschedule. If we can't reschedule, some of those might have to be canceled.
And then I know I saw an athletic post about games being changed in times this week that are here at home and other places. Is it up to the school that's hosting the event to change that time, or
Yes.
do we have input on that as well?
We can have input. If they don't change it, we can say no. It all depends on what it is. Now, it's not a firm and fast rule. So you have a game that starts at 4 o'clock. Let's say it's football and they go into overtime. Like the first game that we played that went to 12:30 midnight because of schedule change or because of the storm. You can't really deal with that. Basically, you're just going to have to finish it out, take the cautions as best you can, and get the kids at home as quick as you possibly can. So sometimes things will roll over, but our general sense is when we have an activity outside, we try to do that and schedule it with plenty enough time to be able to finish the event before 7 o'clock. If we can't finish the event, we understand that, but when we break the event, and even if it is finished by 7, and kids are waiting around for their rides and stuff, we're going to keep them indoors until parents take responsibility to get them home. So that's the best we can do. We can't guarantee absolute safety from the millions of mosquitoes that are out there. Any other questions on that?
Thank you.
Okay, Bill, we're to leadership team reports.
Thank you. I'll let you go. Any questions on the leadership team reports?
None?
Anything you want to highlight?
I would like to say that athletics is taking off very quickly and being very successful in their different sports. You can see from the reports from our schools that mostly everybody's ramping up. We did a lot of assessment in the last 30 days. Well, has it been 30 days? 21st of August. So yeah, it has been 30 days. We've done a lot of assessments along the way, which is what we do all the time at the beginning of the year to benchmark kids. And now we're going to be stepping into instruction. But the first couple of weeks were spent with our teachers developing a relationship and establishing climate and culture in their classrooms.
We've had, I know we're going to talk about facilities later, but I will have to say that within the last 2 weeks, just going out to visit the schools, that every building that we were in, watching the transition between classes, watching students go from one section of the school to another, was totally impressed with behavior in the hallways and, listening to teachers and coming across the district. It was excellent. So hats off to all of our staff and administrators for starting off the school year in an excellent way. And that was also a lot of feedback too about how this year has gotten off to a great start. So kudos to all of those who are doing that.
Very good. And to a building, they've talked about how great the start has been.
Mm-hmm. I spoke with one of the teachers involved with the resilience team at the middle school, which was kind of the Hawks Nest last year, and I was really excited to hear how positive and productive it's been to have those services for all the students instead of just a select few. So the teacher was super excited, said it's been an awesome, and that teacher thought the Hawks Nest was super successful. So to think it's even more successful this year and to have a better approach to help a lot more kids, it's really exciting to hear that. Because I saw that on here and I was like, it's got to be, I saw the resilience team. I was like, it's got to be part, something like that. Yeah. I was real excited to hear more about it today. So
I'm glad you asked about that because the design changed. Really, still having a safe location to detoxify and talk through things and so forth if they need to, but the whole emphasis of the team is to help them resolve conflict in real time and stay in the general ed classroom. And that seems to be working really well, and then we have interactions that go on when kids need a little extra help. So we're really pleased not to have kids in an isolated situation, but only in an interactive way, bringing them back into the classroom.
Anything else? Okay. Move on to.
Well, we're going to switch around item 7 with item 8, if you don't mind. Okay. Item 6 and 7 with item 8.
Okay, so 8's up next.
Yeah, because our auditor went to another district in Jackson at 6:30, and it's come in route.
Looks like he might be right there.
That looks like our auditor. He is there.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Do you need a second? This is ready for you.
Okay.
You good? All right.
Did we do an agenda adjustment or?
No, we're good. Nice timing.
Okay, so we are going to go to discussion draft fiscal year 2018-19 audit report as prepared and presented by Raymond Rouse.
Becky, intros?
Oh,
Introduction.
sorry. This is Nathan Balderman, and he is our auditor at Raymond Roxon.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your time. I realize all of you have just received this audit, but tonight I'll just go briefly over things. Feel free to interject at any time though if you have any questions. The financial statements are final. This is the, we issued, the date on the report was the 20th on Friday. We just finalized things today, so we can bring copies with us tonight. So I want to start by saying, I mean, this is, we continue to enjoy the relationship that we have with the district here, working with Becky and her team. This year was a year of transition, but at the same point, I think it went very smoothly. I'm very pleased with how it went this year. And I think as you look at the reports, you'll find that the results of the audit, in terms of our results, in terms of findings, those types of things, you'll be pleased as well. So what you have in front of you is two separate documents. The first document is the bound report. This is your financial statements. Includes our audit report, and then also includes the single audit at the back of the report, which is your federal compliance audit that was done as a part of the audit as well. As you go through the report, I'm just going to walk through and tell you what's in each section. The first section, page 1, is the independent auditor's report. For the financial statements themselves, that's the only piece of this report that's ours. The financial statements themselves, we assist in preparing the financial statements just because it's efficient for us. We do it all year round. We're doing these. And so for most districts, for most governments for that matter, they choose to have their auditors assist just because doing it once a year versus doing it as a part of your job all the time makes a big difference in efficiency. So, but ultimately, the financial statements themselves are still a responsibility of management. Management has a responsibility for putting internal controls in place over the financial reporting, over the preparation of this report, but also over the accounting systems and everything to make sure that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. Our job then, the second part of this report, the independent auditor's report responsibility, is to plan an audit so that we can give an opinion on the financial statements, and plan and perform the audit so we can give that opinion. It's not to, overall, to give you an opinion on internal controls. It's not to come up with findings, that kind of thing. That's kind of a byproduct of what we do. What we're really trying to do is give you opinion on the financial statements so that you can rely on the information that's in there. The opinion itself is considered to be unmodified. That's the paragraph on the top of page 2. The opinion, an unmodified opinion, is basically the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects, which to me, I like to say in layman terms, that means you can rely on the information that's presented. So there's a lot of other language in that report, but that's the gist of it. The next section, this starts on page 6, is management's discussion analysis. This is a very high-level overview and explanation of what's in the financial statements and what the results were. The tables and stuff that are in there have comparative presentation, but it's at that government-wide basis that's on a full accrual accounting. It's not what you're used to budgeting, that type of thing, like in the general fund. But there is some information, there's some narratives, explanations as to what happened. Again, that's some information that you can read and get kind of an overview of what's happened with the district during the year. This, just as a note, this section isn't, under standards, isn't considered to be audited. We do review it to make sure it's consistent with the rest of the board, but based on some of the information that's in there, it's not technically audited. But that's kind of the way the standards are set. That's the way it is at all districts. The next section, starting on page 12 and 13, that's your government-wide financial statements. Page 12 is a statement in that position, like the equivalent of a balance sheet. These statements are presented on a full accrual basis of accounting, so it's more like a business, but based on the government audit accounting standards. If you remember, and you were here in past years, you'll know that this information includes the biggest thing that causes it does show a deficit, but all school districts in the state of Michigan show a deficit because that includes your proportionate share of the unfunded liability of the statewide pension and retiree healthcare system. Last year, the retiree healthcare system liability came to show in your financial statements, and that's why you're showing a deficit of $34.1 million. But like I said, that's the same for any district in the state of Michigan. They're all showing deficits because that liability is huge. And where I like to say how it has an impact on you, other than that you're required to report under generally accepted accounting principles, is, that number being so huge is why so much of the money, the state's money, and so much of your money is going towards pensions in the system. If you weren't having to pay that liability, there'd be theoretically a lot more money to go towards other things in education besides just paying for that healthcare, but that number is huge. So, starting on page 14 are your fund statements, governmental fund statements, and this is more what my school districts like to look at. These are the statements that you're used to, what you're budgeting, those types of things. So the first column on page 14 is your general fund balance. In that, you show a fund balance of $4.4 billion. That's the first column of that. There's a small amount that's considered to be non-spendable, where you have prepaid, some money's already been spent. And then your unassigned fund balance is $4,369,000. And that equates to approximately 14% of your general fund expenditures. If you go to, and then the other major fund that's presented here is the sinking fund. There's a calculation that goes into determining major funds based on the overall dollar amounts. But the sinking fund is the other amount that's there. That's all restricted, so all the money that's come in, that's the balance that's left as of June 30th to spend for that at about $2.4 million. If you then go to page 16, this is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances. For your income statement for those funds, you'll see column for the general fund, the sinking fund, and all your non-majors. You combine into one column, and there's same with balance sheet. There's statements in the back for those, and that includes other funds, including food service, that type of thing are included in that presentation in the back. The general fund, if you're looking at a good a more detailed schedule on the general fund, is on page 18 and 19. That's your budget to actual statement for the general fund. And you can see there the results. The original budget is the first column. This is what was adopted prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. The final budget would include any budget amendments up through June 30th of 2019, and then the actual results is where the numbers actually came in and ties back to the rest of the report. So you can see there the overall change. If you go to the bottom of page 19, the increase in fund balance that brought the balance from $4.1 million up to $4,373,000. Page 20 and 21 are your fiduciary fund statements. This includes your private purpose trust funds and your student activities funds, the private purpose trust or the scholarship funds. Thing I note here is this is the last year that it will be presented like this. There's a new standard that will be implemented for next fiscal year that takes how these types of funds are presented. And basically what's happening across the state is what most places are finding are these funds are all going to go into special revenue funds. So with private purpose trust funds, scholarship funds, what we're finding is in most cases, those scholarship funds that by the name of the fund, the type of fund is private purpose trust. if there's not a formal trust agreement and trust arrangement, which most schools don't have for their scholarship funds, those are actually now going to be presented as special revenue funds. It's just a presentation issue of where it gets located in the statements. And then student activities funds, as we started going through those as well, because there's some level of administrative control over those funds, and administrative involvement in those funds, those are now under definitions of the standards, of the accounting standards, getting presented as special revenue funds. One of the interesting things that's come up with that over the last year is that as implementation has been rolled out and people have started asking questions, is there are some legal questions that come up as a result of that. When something goes from being presented as an agency fund, where it's kind of more of a flow through, and it's going through as a special revenue fund, there's budgeting issues, but then there's also issues, potential issues of legality. Sometimes when, by changing where it's being reported, there's interpretations that there's certain things that under state law you can't spend, and can't be spent in the same way. So a lot of our districts are finding that, you know, there's guidance getting put out by the major law firms that are in the state, and there may be some questions on occasion that have to go to the level where you might need to ask your attorney about whether they're still permissible under the new reporting requirements. So the accounting standard itself did require it to be changed, but because it's being presented in a different way, the way the state law is written, it now brings into question some issues. The next section of financial statements is the notes. There's nothing really new in the presentation here that I need to point out this year. You know, there were some slight changes in the presentations on certain debt, but nothing significant, just more in titles and how it's presented in the debt footnote than anything, but nothing major. After that, you have required supplementary information, which gives you some, on page 48, 49, gives you some history of what has happened with the liability that's being reported for misters, as well as the contributions that have been made over time into that plan by the district. And then starting on page 52 are those non-major fund statements where you can see the food service fund, all the different debt service funds you have, and then the remainder that's left on that 2010B capital projects fund, which is down to $7,500, which is almost fully spent as of June 30th. So that's all on the financial statements themselves. The next section of the report is the Single Audit Act Compliance section. If you go to page 62 and 63, this is your schedule of expenditures of federal awards. This details out all of the grant funds that are federal, originated from the federal government, and they're all passed through the state of Michigan to the district. And you can see the spending there during the year. You can see the third column that's in there, the middle column on page 63, shows 2.2 million is what your total expenditures were for the year. And that's spent on your two largest programs, your child nutrition programs and your Title I program are the biggest ones. I'm gonna skip over a lot of this. The rest of the pages you get to a good summary on page 71, which is the summary of auditors' results. This gives in kind of a table format, kind of what the result of our piece of things is as auditors. So when we were talking about the financial statements and the opinion on the financial statements, I mentioned the opinion that was issued was an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. That's that first line. I also talked about the internal controls and how management's responsible for those internal controls. We as a part of our audit are looking at those controls, not for the purpose of giving an opinion on the controls, but we do, if things come to our attention during the audit that raise to a certain level, material or significant, we're required to report those. Pleased to say we don't have any findings of that nature this year, so no matters were reported. Also, under government auditing standards, we're required if there's non-compliance with material, the financial statements, that comes to our attention during the audit, whether it's a federal grant, a state grant, or some other contract that you have, or even state law, we're required to report that, but there was nothing to report there. And the same, so then the other piece of things on the federal award side, we go through a risk assessment process where we look at your major, or at all of your programs, to determine what programs under the standards, and how they have things set up, which ones we need to test. We ended up testing the child nutrition program this year, and that was your major program. So we're not testing compliance over absolutely everything that shows up on that schedule, but we select that program, and then we have certain compliance requirements that we have to test based on the federal guidance, and then the state also gives some guidance on that. There's a slight change this year. Thankfully, we tested child nutrition here and not Title I, because the feds put out guidance that was supposed to come out in March, that came out actually in the end of June, which then was a mess and wasn't correct, and a lot of people complained about it, and then they came out with revised guidance on Friday, which I found out, when you find out after you've already issued reports that the guidance is changing, it's always a comforting feeling, but it's kind of the way the federal government works sometimes. So, thankfully, for child nutrition, we didn't have any changes to that testing, so all of our testing is complete. But we test, they allow you to, the federal government now allows, they call it the Pick 6. It's an interesting terminology, it has nothing to do with football and interceptions, but they're allowed to pick 6 requirements that you can test as that they can require auditors to test as part of a single audit for each of their programs. So we go through, we look at those 6 areas, we have to design our test then to determine whether there was any non-compliance as a result of that. I'm happy to say on that as well, there was no non-compliance and no internal control issues. So that makes pages 72 and 73 very clean, nothing reported, and no findings to report on that. Then the second document that you have in front of you is the communication with those charged with governance. This just covers some things under standards that we're required to report to you. Things like what our responsibility is for the financial statements, any significant estimates, what those significant estimates are, uncorrected and corrected misstatements. If things come to our attention during the audit that had to be corrected, we have to report those things to you, as well as those things that weren't corrected. There were some items that are on the very last page on a schedule of adjustments passed that, during the course of an audit, things will come up, whether it's because of timing of our procedures versus when the accounting transactions actually took place and when the adjustments were made. So we're coming out in, late July, early August. There's already been adjustments made at that point, and then we get updated information. The state of Michigan, the August state aid payment comes out, or those types of things come out, and sometimes there's some adjustments that get passed on, and management passes on those, and then we summarize those and report those to you. So the items that were included in this schedule, the overall impact on them, there's some that go some way on assets, some go up another way on liabilities, but the overall impact was $20,000. So the impact on the financial statements and the bottom line was minimal and something that can be passed on, but we're required to report those things to you. So some of it is state aid adjustments that go one way, and there's some things that go a different way that, that it wasn't significant enough to try to change the financial statements, especially with the timing that they were coming out, those types of things. So, the other attachment that's in the letter, attachment A, is upcoming changes to accounting standards, just to kind of give you a feel of how busy the Governmental Accounting Standards Board is, and then to know what's coming up. There's only really 2 that will have an impact on the district that I see. The first 2 that are listed there, fiduciary activities, is the one that we already talked about, with student activities. Gives you a a brief explanation there. And then GASB 87 on leases. There's some changes on how leases will be accounted going forward. Basically, there's been a distinguishing factor between whether something was an operating lease or a capital lease and how that was reported. There's some impact that's going to be implemented in fiscal year 21. It also gives you a link in there and talks about where you can go if you ever want to read the entire standard. So just in case you're curious. So that's all I had, but would be happy to answer any questions you have.
I don't really understand the unfunded liabilities with the pension. Is this something that, because it's a deficit on our budget, is that something that we are going to have to pay for in the future, or why is that on?
So it's complicated. So the standards, it's because of the way the standards are written. So you're a part of a, what they call a cost-sharing multiple employer pension plan. So that's what MPSers is. And so as a result of that plan, being in an underfunded situation, the way they wrote the standards was to say the best way that we can get that impact onto each of the employer's financial statement is we're gonna take a proportionate share of that liability and of the estimate that we have sitting out there, and we're gonna make you put it on your books. Even though there's absolutely no way that even if you had the amount of liability that was there, you couldn't go pay it. So, the requirements, I mean, I think that if you had, $30 million to go spend and give to them and say, I want this liability gone, there's no provision for that, you couldn't do that. And so it's a liability that's there that you can't pay until they tell you to pay under the statutory requirements under the statutes of the state of Michigan. So eventually, somebody has to pay for that liability. They put it on the books, but it's not a liability that you can write a check for.
Is there a plan to eventually pay it? Because it seems like somebody.
Well, the state of Michigan has all kinds of things that they've put into place. I know in terms of how they have that extra funding that they give to school that they give to you to give back to them, so that it flows through your books. They have different funding mechanisms that they have to try to pay that liability down. They're constantly making changes to the plans, which is reflective in how complicated it is to actually implement the standard, because there's, I don't even know what we're up to now, different iterations of what the plan, what you could be based on when you were hired into the district and which provisions you took into the plan. So it's, yes, there's plans out there that the state is working through, but, and they've accelerated some of the funding mechanisms and how quickly they're trying to pay that down, but, it's a huge number to try to get through, so.
Any more questions?
Becky, on page 9, when we talk about general fund budgetary highlights and the adjustments that we made last year, 22G funds for the annexation were still in the mix. This year, they're not.
There's still 22G funds in there.
Okay, how much is being carried? Do you have any idea? All right.
On the same page, quick question. The instruction, it jumped up like 7 million from 18 to 19. Was there a change in staffing?
So this is where the government-wide financial statement presentation comes in. If I'm reading the correct place, when you're looking at on page 8.
Yep.
That is because of the standards. So with this pension and OPEB standard, what happens is that liability, that estimate changes every year. And so that has to run through your books when
Gotcha. So that's
estimate
the
changes. So it
6
gets
million.
allocated and most of it goes to instruction. So
Gotcha.
that's the reason that number jumped up so much.
Good.
I'll just say kudos. I mean, it's perfect clean report, right?
Another clean bill of health
So-
and 14% fund balance ending the year.
So, I mean, I know this is the ultimate goal, is to have an audit report come out like this, so great job to you and your staff.
Excellent. Thank you for your audit.
Right, yep, thank you.
Okay. Now we move into number 7, action item, audit report. Accept the fiscal year 2018-19 audit report as prepared and presented by Raymond Robson.
Support.
Background?
Background, please.
We just had it, but after the business office closed the books for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2019, Raymond Robson came to the district in July to audit the financial statements. The audit report was thoroughly reviewed by the business office prior to being presented to the board. The report is now being presented to the board in its final form. It is a recommendation of the superintendent that action item audit report be approved as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so we're at discussion.
So moved.
I think we, did we get both the
Pardon
first
me?
time through? So we have a motion and a
Yes.
support.
Just a quick question. How long have they been doing our audits? Do we know?
Raymond Robson, how long have we known? Long time,
Yeah. I
at
think
least while I've been
Plus.
here.
I think it's been the whole time I've been on
At
the
least
board,
been while
so-
I've been here.
Yep. Okay, any other questions? I'm guessing I start with Sean. What's that? All right, start with Brent, sorry.
Yes.
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 Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
that's what happens when I get here late, sorry. Number 8, discussion, comprehensive facility needs assessment and cost assessments.
Okay, we're gonna have Rob and Dave Martin. Rob Roman and Dave Martin. Rob's from CSM and Dave's from King Scott.
Dr. Davis. So you can see my report book is 3 times as thick, so I get 3 times as much.
No.
presentation.
No, it
Is
doesn't
it,
work.
is gonna be as clean as, is it gonna be as clean as Becky's report?
Good try.
Okay.
You have pictures.
Won't work that way.
All right, so it's our pleasure to be back with Marshall, as we indicated a couple weeks ago. You have the final assessment booklet at your tables tonight, and we're gonna give you just a very high-level overview of the information that you have. I have with me Dave Delpere and Rob Rollman from CSM Group, and Rob will take part of the presentation as well. So what we'll talk about is generally the introduction, how it came about, the observations, and give you just a glimpse at the information you'll see and how it's formatted. Probably where your interest lies predominantly tonight will be the cost information. And then you'll recall that we discussed the facility condition rating information last time. That's also included for you. Plus some question times, and then what do we do with this information that we have? Let's start that discussion. So, CSM Group and King Scott had interviews with several of the district staff regarding the condition of the facilities, and we took tours, walked through, we looked at the drawings. You'll see lots of pictures in the report where we've actually looked at the windows and the soffits and all those things that might not interest you as board members, but are important to your functions of your building. That was a group of professional architects and engineers from the King Scott team, and then the construction manager, folks from CSM. Our objective was to provide an inventory of the district's facilities, to help with maintenance, to look at the general condition of the facilities and provide data in a concise format, so that you can quickly determine what you might do with that information, and then produce the FCR facility condition recommendation for each building, and we have an aggregate number for that. That helps generally to quantify and prioritize information for deferred maintenance projects as well as capital planning projects. So just a quick glimpse of the format. You'll see a topic. This happens to be Kroll School. Section of mechanical items are listed. These are general mechanical items. This happens to be plumbing items that we're showing. Floor drain condition varies. Recommend replacing heavily corroded floor drains. And then we provide generalized pictures of those items for you so that you can see what we're talking about. The building is broken apart into several aspects: exterior, interior, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, finishes, roofing, windows, etc. And it's all in this format. At this time, I'm going to ask Rob to come up and take the podium and talk about the cost information that's included.
So if you go to tab number 5, you'll actually see this within your packet. Essentially what we did is we took the assessments that King's got together, we walked the facilities, we went through the different facilities, took a look at kind of the condition. We took that original 2006 assessment, updated it with what has been completed since the assessment was done, with new costing for what needs to be done still to date. So you'll see within there, in tab 5, you'll see actually the updated assessment costing. In tab number 6, you'll see all the items that have been completed since that original 2006 assessment for all commercial buildings. We just kind of provided that as additional information really for the district. Essentially we went through determining what was done, marked it off, and then kind of stuck it within there so you can have that. Underneath tab 5, kind of a general overview of the way we looked at it is we broke it down by the elementaries, then the middle school, and then the 2 high schools. Going down the numbers, kind of what's all included within this is kind of to David's point, architectural upgrades, ADA upgrades, code requirements that may need to be taken into account, security, mechanical and plumbing, electrical, and then we have a line item in there for district identified needs. This is something that would come up during meetings and conversations with principals, administration, etc., for things that the district might need that currently aren't in place. Those are meetings that have taken place at this point. The reason why it says to be determined is we're currently still working through that process. There's kind of a conceptual review that needs to take place in order to put numbers to it for you.
We talk a little bit more about that in the schedule, and we've talked about that at the last meeting, the following steps. Yes, ma'am?
I just have a question, because under Opportunity High School, it looks like it's 24 million, but the total says 23. Was there a typo? I'm not sure I understand.
For the 24 million,
What's the 23 you're looking at?
On the total,
The total.
it says
seems
24
to be
for the
less
opportunity, the
than-
total shows
yeah,
23.
it does look like it's a typo.
Yeah.
It looks like the total line item isn't calculating correctly across. They are calculating correctly going down. So that actually should be higher, you are correct. One thing to point out, opportunities is a good one where you'll see on the mechanical and the plumbing, you'll see a line item on there specifically for that where it's 15 million. One thing to note on these is that that's not saying that you need $15 million worth of mechanical work within your facility. That's actually numbers that build on each other. So there's lines in there that'll be replacing unit ventilators within the classrooms, but then there's also line items for replacing the entire mechanical system as a whole. So you're not going to take every single activity that's within the assessment. So just to be kind of clear with that total line item of the 24 million, you wouldn't want to necessarily look at that number as this is everything you need to do within that school, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so Rob, with that, all the figures that we have under each of the buildings brings it up to what standard? Is that the expectation that these need to be, to put that kind of money in to make them fully functional as well as other buildings?
I can speak to that one. And additionally, so let me first answer your question. It is A facility assessment is a benchmark of the current facility against the current codes. So as we talk about replacement of unit ventilators, codes have changed. Since those were installed originally in the building, it would be installing new ones that require fresh air intake and things like that into account. So it would bring everything up to a current code level standard from a facility. If you were to build the building brand new, we would be slightly different because the bones, the infrastructure would be still the old building, but we might have new finishes, new roof, new windows, new mechanical, etc.
Okay.
So not quite brand new building, but a long way towards that. Secondly, I wanted to point out, this is organized in the fashion that follows the architectural, the King Scott reports, so it's organized. As you see the pictures, you can glance over and say, okay, so what's all of that kind of cost? And lastly, there are several items right now as we work through this that will come up. Fixtures, furniture, and equipment. What we're talking about there is classroom furniture, pieces of equipment for the educational spaces, etc. Those things have yet to be developed. We'll be working with committees hopefully to further expand on that information.
And the reason we have that on the summary sheet is not to just show that it really needs to be completed, it's just so it doesn't fall off the list. It's just as a placeholder, so should we be going through and it's determined that technology, for example, is sufficient, and it doesn't need to be, that's when it would just be updated at that point. But that's really just kind of a holding spot on this so that we don't forget it as we're moving through the process as a whole.
I question, and just one more thing.
Yeah.
I'll jump to. This is looking at what exists today. So the information that you're reviewing tonight is here. The other things that we're talking about, the owner identified needs, as Rob indicated, those don't exist today, so they're not yet included in the facility assessment.
That was my question. Yep.
Lisa?
So for example, for classrooms, if someone was interested in 21st century seating, that's gonna be in that bottom section, that's still to be determined. Or if
Yes.
they wanted round tables versus square tables, that's in that section.
Yes.
Okay,
We've actually had some of those discussions, but we're focusing tonight on the assessment of just what's here today.
From a technology standpoint, Becky, this is probably more for you and Taryn. Are those, the presentation Taryn did for us a year ago, year and a half? Would those be able to translate into these pretty easily, or they're gonna have to be reevaluated?
They will be adjusted. I provided the initial numbers that I provided the board with.
Okay.
As we had projected out, basically on a 30-year cycle of purchasing equipment. That hasn't changed for the most part.
Okay.
The prices of those items has changed.
Mm-hmm.
So market value will change until we get to that point. He has the numbers as they were.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this portion of the presentation? This is just kind of showing, really kind of to the talking point that we went through the original 2006 assessment in detail and determined what was completed to date. As I mentioned, that's actually all captured within tab number 6 of your packet that you have in front of you. Some of the things that are captured within these costs, election fees, escalation is captured. We captured 2 years of escalation within these numbers. Anticipating that it would be carried forward, work would start for a few years if you proceeded. Bond costs, general conditions, professional fees, construction and design contingencies as well are captured within here. What's not captured, we've kind of already talked to, technology, the fixtures, furniture, and equipment, the FF&E. And then the owner expressed needs, to your point, Brent is not in here, so those are the items that we'll be working through with the district identified.
We've talked about the facility condition rating previously, so I'm not gonna spend any time on that. I think you had a pretty good grasp of that information. What other questions do you have regarding the information? Again, it's a pretty big report.
Yeah. Did you guys mark any of these? So when we go through these pictures and things, I mean, you basically have 3 ratings, basically, you know, like, I saw it on one of the pages, let me find it, so
Is it the priority?
Yeah, the priority rating, do you guys code those or prioritize those in any way in here so that we know that?
So, we're gonna come to that question. Could I defer answering that for just a minute?
Yes.
And we'll talk exactly the process that I'd like you to consider.
Okay.
And if I understood it, so when you met with the administrators, that they identified, I'll just use Gordon as an example, that if they identified that another classroom would be needed or expansion, are you guys, that's the pieces that you're working on now to
Yes,
price
that's
out and
correct.
things like that?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
If you remember too, the updates that were done by the needs assessment 2006. Some of those items are still there that we never really did anything with because we did a lot, but we didn't do everything. And those still hold. And there are some things when this is all said and done, if we move forward with any financing on this, we're still gonna have items that are just be outstanding on this list that we won't be able to get to, that'll go to normal. And we're gonna try to pattern this down to what can the sinking fund take care of, what can the general fund take care of, et cetera, et cetera. So we're not there yet. I just want you to know that all of this doesn't go away because we go after some funding on it, and also things will be there on that list no matter what we do.
For that 2006 portion, the items that were not completed, those are the items that we did go through. We actually updated the pricing for those items. So the numbers you're looking at in there are not from the original assessment. Those are actually today's numbers. So those have been updated moving forward.
Other questions? I didn't forget yours, but we're gonna answer that right now. So, the owner expressed needs, we've talked about, you saw a list of some of those in our last presentation. Those are not within the cost numbers that you were seeing tonight. So Brent, your question was, okay, who does the prioritization? And if I presented the facility needs assessment, this is kind of our roadmap to how you handle this information. We've got all of the pieces accomplished except for prioritizing the results. It's our recommendation that we move to the next section that I gave you and look at the development of district facility improvement teams or something of that nature to help prioritize. We facilitate that project and certainly will make recommendations, but as I spoke at the last meeting, districts tend to have different priorities based on different needs.
Will you guys mark like, ADA accessibility or, there's obviously things that have to meet specific code
Yes.
because of safety or law, those will be,
Those are identified
Okay.
for you in the building information.
Okay.
We have sections for ADA, we have sections for code
okay,
that are in there. And so we've already identified it, and I mean, that might be one way that you could prioritize that information. In fact, we did that with Marshall several years ago. Safety and security and code were one. Life cycle was another, which talked about things like carpeting and painting walls and those kind of things, ceilings. The energy savings was another category that we looked at. And we can break it apart into those kind of big categories and help the district prioritize. But that's where I think we're at with the information tonight. and I think Dr. Davis may speak a little bit more regarding that. From our timeline, we're developing the conceptual ideas for the owner needs now and pricing of that information. Roughly by the end of October, we should be back. In fact, I put a couple Board of Education, so mid-October presentation, end of October presentation, as to how things are coming along. We'll look at those concept ideas and have you provide us some input. We'll put numbers to those. We'll come back and do an update on that information roughly. And I think the whole timeline established for this next phase is pretty much the month of October. Okay?
So,
go ahead, Frankie.
What I'm gonna recommend to the board, I've talked to Bill about, is I'd like to form a facilities needs committee, subcommittee from the board. So 2 or 3 members of the board on that committee, and then key stakeholders in our Albion and Marshall communities to sit on that board by invitation, based on their skills and expertise and length of time in the community, et cetera, et cetera. Get some suggestions from all of us of who really needs to sit on that committee. It can be as large as it needs to be, but we need to really digest this piece of the needs assessment and talk about prioritizing and so forth, and some ideas about just this before we even get into what else do we need, right? And would you be available to be a part of that committee?
Absolutely.
Come in and talk and
Yes,
help
sir.
us with
Both firms are committed
next to
to
Frank's
help
question?
facilitate
Yeah,
that.
okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's, and you can go forward at your leisure on that, Bill, as far as trying to find which board members want to sit on that subcommittee. And it's going to be weekly because we have to move through this needs assessment and understand where we are. It's a foundation piece.
So what I'd like to do is, any board members that are interested, we are restricted to 3. We can't have more than 3. But let me know if you're interested. And then the other piece is any community members that you guys know that would be interested or would be a good fit, let me know those as well. And then I'll work with Randy and Kimberly to get that all set and start to get meetings established and get the ball rolling with that. So you can catch me after the meeting, email me, text me, however you guys want to do it. But kind of think it through. Let me know if you guys, it is a big commitment. I know Richard did it after the bond. So it was a steering committee, so it was different, but it's a similar type of commitment. I mean, were you weekly or every other week, it seemed?
For about 6 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna say this is gonna be 6 years, because there will be, there will be one that'll be the 6 years after we get it passed, but.
That's because we all did such a good job. We
Yeah,
had money left over.
exactly.
Keep going.
It was a good process.
Yeah.
So this is the establishing the citizen group with members of the board, your company, and then also the community. And we want to do that within the next, have it established within, according to this, the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And it's to digest this information and really figure out where our baseline is as far as needs. And then we can also start talking about what's coming up out of the building administrators and the teachers and so forth, interacting with King Scott around those areas of want as opposed to just needs.
So when in the time frame will we get the information on the new air conditioning units or new classrooms or other things that are there now? The seating tables, other things that we don't have the cost information for yet.
So, because they haven't been actually determined what it is that will be provided, so there are ideas, a lot of it in my head right now, but I've got to get that out into kind of a conceptual plan, work with CSM group to put numbers to that. And my thought is that probably by the 14th, October 14th meeting of the board, that we would have information to say, okay, here are some ideas for the conceptual items that we're talking about. And have you work through a little bit of that information to provide direction, maybe weed out. And that would be something that committee could do, board, subcommittee, could take the options, Bill, you know, and if we gave you 3 options, narrow it down to 1, and we take that to the board and say, here's what we're looking at. By the end of October, then we've got the pricing kind of put together for that with the selected option. And so we'll have all of that ready to go by the, it's a Board of Education update, 10/28.
So as an example, so when we talked about that $15 million for the electrical and things like that at the opportunity, as you said, some of those are building on each other. You do this one, you don't need this one. So that's what this committee would look to narrow down a little bit, correct?
I
Am I saying that
think this committee
correctly?
would be more higher level picture in providing direction.
Okay.
I see the actual working with the community group in November
Okay.
to go through line by line like we've done
Okay.
before of the information and kind of pull out those electrical things or fire alarm things or things
So
like
narrow
that and prioritize it to Brent's point.
Okay.
Right now, I think we're looking at this committee to kind of direct the process at a very high level.
Okay.
Yeah, so if that scared you to say, I gotta go through this line by line in the next 2 weeks, that's not what we're asking.
Okay. So just a higher level. Okay.
So as we were thinking about this group and talking to people in the community, would this be a pretty good guideline to say, like, if you want to be a part of this group, or we're asking people to be a part of this group, these dates on here where it says meetings 1, 2, 3, 4, like kind of a rough estimate of like you should be able to be available for these dates that are on
Yes.
here roughly,
Yes.
give a day or two?
Yeah, so Dr. Davis said,
Okay.
you know, it's not 6 years, obviously, but it will be intensive probably for the next 2 months. So right around Thanksgiving, that'll kind of, we'll make a final presentation to the board, and that urgency will drop off.
Okay.
And, you know, we'll see where the recommendation takes us from that point.
This would be a good guideline to follow.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do we know the last bond, how much revenue that created for these types of things, roughly? That doesn't need to be.
2 questions, it was right around 30 million, 31 million, do you recall? I looked at it the other day, one question was like 24 and the other was 8, something like that.
That's right.
31, 32 million. You spent it, Richard, don't you don't remember
I
that?
told people different numbers depending on what the audience was.
That's-
Around 35,
Yeah.
I think it was.
If you, Brent, if you go on, State of Michigan website, and look at the school bond loan fund, it's SBLF, it will tell you all of the district bond issues that have passed
Okay.
since they've been recording them. So they have exactly that information, it's all public record.
31 million, 30 million's a close, that's good, that's close enough.
It was
for
31 million
Yeah.
plus.
Yeah.
And you know, the first question, or one question was separate about the auditorium, performing arts area.
Okay,
And then the other one is completely about the rest of the buildings
gotcha.
and the high school as far as functional.
See, I was saying 35, it's 33.765.
That's what I said.
Almost 35.
That's what I said.
I looked it up.
I know you did.
Thank you.
33.7.
And I know we've talked about this before, and one of the pieces that was really great to see through the process was what we started out with and what we were looking to accomplish grew, or we did all that, and then it grew beyond that when
Started hitting
they
the lower
came in under
priority stuff,
budget, or the focus or the end result was altered, and it ended up resulting in savings. So then we were able to use those funds to address another item that was part of the bond and things like that. So there were many times that the committee came back and said, hey, we got funds, we want to do this and we want to do that. So and then through Becky going and refinancing and things like that, we've, you know, the last bond was a huge success in my mind as far as what we received out of it, being able to reduce the length of time that is going to be on the mills and things like that. So overall, I think it went really, really well. And the process, I thought, worked really well. So, Any other questions?
I've used all mine up.
What's that?
I've used all mine up.
Okay. I know there was one parent that's been in a couple meetings that expressed interest, so I'll reach out to her. And then anybody else, like I said, let me know if you guys are interested. And then any parents or any community members that you think have an interest in being involved in the first process, let me know.
Truly want to hear from you guys on who you think needs to be at the table.
I think we're gonna let you guys off the hook. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You guys may as well get your names on the chairs because you guys will be here for a bit. So. Just keep your names on the chairs because you're gonna be here for several months for this.
Yes.
I want to get involved, but I don't know.
Okay, we're gonna move on to number 9, action item, board policy. Adopt board policy 2410, prohibition of referral or assistance, and board policy 1439, administrator discipline. Can you give us some background, Randy, please?
You want to, no? You don't want to do motion first?
Do we do motion?
That's okay, I'll do it background. Background, the board were provided drafts of board policy 2410, prohibition of referral and assistance, and board policy 1439, administrator discipline on September 10th, 2019. The policies have been available for public review since that time. The board is now being asked to approve the adoption of the policies as recommended by the district's policy provider. There is another evolving issue that I want to share with you in discussion. However, after that discussion, it is a recommendation of the superintendent that action item policy be approved as presented.
I entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, we can open up to discussion. You want to start with your?
Sure, yeah. And at your table, your seats, you've got the prohibition of referral of assistance, 2410 and 1439. There was guidance from Truan that said in the Michigan Legislature's Conference Committee report, and this literally came out on Friday morning, was signed out of the conference committee, presented immediately to superintendents up at MASA. As currently written, Section 166 requires local and intermediate school district boards to adopt and implement a policy that penalizes a school official, board member, school employees, or other person, quote unquote, for 1, referring a student for an abortion, for 2, assisting a student in obtaining an abortion, or 3, violating revised school code section 1507, which pertains to sex education. The policy must also fine an individual employee who violates the policy in an amount equal to or not less than 3% of that employee's annual compensation. As it currently stands, the school's failure to adopt the policy by October 1, 2019 will result in a $100,000 forfeiture of state aid fund by that non-compliant school. If the amendatory language from the conference report is enacted, Section 166 would still require school boards to adopt the policy described above, but with some notable changes. The policy would no longer require penalties for violating revised school code section 1507. The policy would apply to neither other persons, quote unquote, at the district, nor parents or legal guardians of the student being referred for or assisted with obtaining an abortion. Most significantly, the policy need not assess a mandatory fine against school employees or other individuals subject to the policy. Additionally, under CR1, the failure to adopt the policy would not result in a $100,000 forfeiture of state aid. Instead, the policy would become subject to State School Aid Act Section 166A, which sets forth a complaint and investigation process. Under proposed Section 166A, a student's parents or legal guardian would be able to file a complaint with the superintendent alleging a violation of Section 166. Thereafter, the district's failure to take corrective action of that alleged violation could result in an appeal first to the intermediate school district in which the district is located and then to Michigan Department of Ed. If Michigan Department of Ed substantiates the alleged violation, the district will have to forfeit 1% of its state aid. CR1's proposed amendment in Section 166 has not been enacted yet, but we are preparing policy language that complies with the probable update. I was at a Neola policy symposium on Tuesday, We did not have this language at that point, but we also had a discussion about these policies. Bottom line is, we still have to abide by the expectation because it has not been signed into law or not enacted. So we have to abide by the 10-1 deadline to get this policy passed, which is your opportunity to do that tonight. And then once the law changes, then we'll have, Neola will come back through and they'll change the policy. It'll come back up before you again for final approval.
Just to change some of the terminology, some of those amendments.
Yeah.
Any questions? That all makes sense as far as what Randy just read and that? We received the policy, I think, a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So any questions that anybody has? Okay, let's start with Larry.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to number 10, action item, financial. Approve the purchase of an 84-passenger regular education school bus. What's the background?
Background. Due to an increase in ridership and the difficulty in hiring drivers, it is being recommended the district purchase a larger capacity school bus to either utilize the district's driver resources. Currently, 2 buses transport students to and from the CACC in Battle Creek. By purchasing a larger capacity school bus, 1 bus would be able to transport all CACC students. The yearly savings from purchasing this bus will be around $30,000. In addition, it will free up the sub-driver that is currently having to do the second run. A request was sent to 3 bus dealers to see what the availability was for a used 84 or 89 passenger bus. One response was received from Midwest Transit for an 84 passenger bus in the amount of $60,308. This bus has 23,107 miles on it and has passed the state police inspection. The current year budget will not be affected by this purchase, as Midwest Transit is allowing the district to take delivery of the bus under a lease with no money down. The first payment will be due after July 1, 2020. Transportation Director recommends the purchase of the 84 passenger bus at a total cost to the district in the amount of $61,715. It is a recommendation of the student that action item financial be approved as presented.
Entertain a motion, please.
Move approval.
Support.
Thank you. Discussion.
What's the typical lifespan of a bus?
We've got some low 4s on the road right now. But they got 240,000 miles on them. Around 260, you start looking at getting rid of them. So everybody says 10 years, but we've got some 14-year-old buses.
Kind of like any other vehicle that comes rolling off the lot. Once it rolls off the lot, depreciation takes effect. But 23,000 miles is pretty reasonable.
Yeah, this bus came from an academy that used it exclusively for athletic events. That's why it's got some few miles on it.
Just to drive their grandmother to and from the grocery store.
There you go.
So we'll be keeping all of our current buses and just adding this one to the fleet?
Yes.
Why is it we don't have to pay anything for a whole year? Is that standard?
She asked why we don't have to pay for it until next year.
We just tried to do it I guess, to not affect this year's budget, because it wasn't planned for this year's budget at all.
So they're just willing to work with us?
Yes, and that's why the cost is 60, the price is 60, the cost is a little over 61. There's like a $1,400 finance charge for that 1 year.
What's a standard bus capacity? I know you told us before, but
77.
77.
When you're talking about the high school, middle school, there's 26 seats, 2 seats, so 52 for high school, middle school. This has 28 seats.
Okay.
So we're able to jump up to like 56 kids. Plus in the 84, there's more aisle room. You can actually get more kids in it, just because of the way the seats are configured.
And can any of the current bus drivers, is there a difference in driving? I mean, I know they're bigger, but is there anything special that they have to drive this versus?
State license.
Okay.
But before it gets put on the road, any driver that's going to drive it will be required to take it out and drive it empty.
Okay.
It steers a whole lot different than a conventional because you're sitting in front of the wheels, the steering wheel.
Okay.
So when you start turning, you have to turn a lot later and a lot quicker.
Okay. Any other questions? Start with Lisa.
Yes.
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 Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to public comments. Anyone can speak on any items. We ask you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
My name is Patricia Taylor. In 2017, Mr. Hutchinson put in place, I assume, a behavior support plan. And I think the superintendent Brandon knew about it, the behavior support plan that Mr. Hutchinson put in place. I'm not gonna mention the person's name that he put in place about he put a behavior support plan in place. And Mr. Hutchinson told me he got 10, I told Mr. Randy, superintendent too, he got 10, 11, and 12 kids that came to him and told him that this girl had been bullying them. They were scared of her. The kids over here at Marshall High School are scared of this girl. Some of them are, some of them not. My granddaughter, the girl has been bullying my granddaughter ever since I came up here in 2017. Has been bullying my granddaughter ever since she's been in elementary school. So what Mr. Hutchinson put in place in 2017 worked. Because I told him I didn't want those girls, there was 4 or 5 other girls in the classroom with her. He didn't put them in the classroom with her. And last year, 2018, she had a positive, productive academic year because she didn't have those girls in the classroom with her. And when that one girl is in the classroom with her, she's talking out loud, she's calling her names, and even when she's in the hallway, it triggers her. When she sees my granddaughter, she starts talking about her, and so now it has got to the point my granddaughter ignore her. Okay, but still when my granddaughter ignore her, okay, so these are some incidents that happen. Okay, both of them go to the CACC, but they're taking different classes. And I think the CACC lockers are down there next to the office or something like that. So she come on Officer 26 telling me that this girl was talking about her and said some different things. I said, well, how's this girl talking about you? Where is she at? She said she's down 2 or 3 lockers down from her because they go to the CACC, and I guess that's where all people CACC lockers. Okay, so then, that was August 26th. She was bullying her. Then August the 26th, after my granddaughter told me that, then I called Mr. Turner. I called him in his office. I called him at 3:33, and I told him what happened. He said he was gonna pull the tape. I don't know if I need to see that tape from August the 26th. I need to see the tape for August the 27th. The school just started August the 21st, and this girl is, to me, I call it terrorizing the kids, which she's been doing this ever since she's been up here 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th grade. I told you this in 2017. And so my granddaughter ignored the girl again. This girl came up to her and told her, why don't you stop picking at her, this and that. 2 or 3 other guys said, leave the girl alone. So then a teacher seen it, took both of them down to the office, and they said something to Mr. Turner. I don't know if Mr. Turner said anything. The teacher asked, I think the teacher asked Mr. Turner, was her BSP still in place? He didn't say nothing. Okay, August 27th. I went to see Mr. Turner August the 26th about my daughter's schedule. And then I asked him, after we got to talking about her schedule, I asked him, could I see her transcript? He didn't understand what I was talking about. He gave me her transcript, her academic transcript transcript that you use when you go to college or something. I wanted to view her whole file. He said he didn't have that. I said, okay. Then August the 29th, I called Ren and his secretary. I called and I left a message and I told him what was going on. September the 9th, I called. Randy never called me back. September the 9th, I called Randy again. And I told her that Randy hadn't called me August the 29th. So she said she'll give him a reminder call. Then September the 9th, I called Jamie Rogers. The reason why I called Jamie Rogers, I called her to see if she had in her office somewhere my granddaughter's full, I need to see view her full transcript. Jamie said, well, no, I don't have that here. Mr. Turner have it. I said, no, Mr. Turner told me he don't have that. She said, well, yes, he has it. So she said, call Mr. Turner in 30 minutes. She told me that she was gonna call Mr. Turner, and I know she left a voicemail and tell Mr. Turner that I would be calling her to view her transcript. From August the 27th to this day, Mr. Turner has not called me back. I don't know why. He has not called me back. Randy has not called me back neither. So then, okay, Mr. Turner has not called me back from August the 27th. I called him the 30 minutes after Jamie told me to call him. I left a message, told him I needed to talk to him on voice. He hasn't called me back. I have accessible rights. I have the rights to inspect and review any education records relating to the child that is collected, maintained, or used by the school. I have a right to a response from the school, meaning a participating agency is the school, to a reasonable request for explanation and interpretation of the records. Mr. Turner still hasn't called me back yet. I called him because Jamie told me that she didn't have the file there. I need to view the full transcript of my granddaughter. Mr. Turner still hasn't called me back yet.
Can I ask you to wrap up your comments and then you and I can catch up after the meeting?
Pardon?
Can I ask you to wrap up your comments? We keep it to 3 minutes. I'll let you go a little bit long. But if you want to just wrap it up and then if you and I can catch up after the meeting, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, that's the accessible ones. Then today, September the 23rd, I called the superintendent's office again and got Kimberly. And I told Kimberly that the superintendent hasn't called me yet. So from August the 29th, I called the superintendent. That was 8 days till September the 9th, I called the superintendent, he hasn't called me back. September the 3rd, from September the 9th to September 23rd, it's 11 days. Then Mr. Tatro, somebody told Mr. Tatro to call me today. Mr. Tatro called me at 12:52 and telling me how was my granddaughter doing and how she been doing since school started. I told her not so good because things been happening. But I don't want to deal with this, Mr. Tatro. You know why? And Randy, I mentioned this to Randy, but me and Randy had 3 conversations in 2017. And when Mr. Hutchinson was principal, he didn't want to have anything to do with me for 6 months. So I went to Mr. Tatro. When I went to Mr. Tatro, me and my granddaughter about this bullying, this is what Mr. Tatro said to me and my granddaughter. And I told Randy and I told Mr. Hutchinson. He said, Pat, you and your granddaughter's whole conversation has been negative. I said, Mr. Tatro, I said, bullying is not a positive thing to talk about. It's a negative thing. He had no business saying that to me. So he called me today and asked him, what do you want? I asked him, I said, what do you want, Mr. Tatro? Well, I'm just calling to check and see how your granddaughter. I told him the things that was going on. They already know what's going on. I explained that. This girl has done some things already since school started to other people. Got these kids scared of her over, not all of them.
I'll catch up with you after the meeting if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to board member comments for which no action may be taken at this meeting.
Well, okay.
Right?
I thought we were going to executive.
After the board member comment.
Sorry.
I just want to say thank you to all the administrators that made time for several of the board members to come out to your buildings, to walk us through, look at the facilities, show us firsthand what was going on in this big binder that we received tonight. So as we're going through it and when we come to a vote whether to pursue this bond, that we'll have a better understanding of what's actually going on in each of the buildings. So thank you for setting aside time in your busy days to walk us through those buildings. We really appreciate it.
Anything else? Okay, may I entertain a motion to go into executive closed session under section 8H of the Open Meetings Act, other protected records.
So moved.
Support.
We'll start with Carrie.
Yes.
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 We want to go in here or?
No, we're gonna go in
Go
my
in the office.
office. It's gonna be a very short conversation.